Hello, I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. This series of podcasts is aimed at financial planning professionals and also those who are looking to enter the financial planning profession. We will be talking during the podcast about all things Certified Financial Planner certification related, talking to other CFPs around the world, and also we will be dropping in on some new entrants who've just entered the financial planning profession, and we'll be checking up along the way on a regular basis with them to see how they're getting on. I hope you enjoy today's podcast. Hello and welcome. I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. And in today's podcast, we are talking to someone who is only just hot off the presses past their Certified Financial Planner, the CISI L7 case study assessment, and just in the process of applying for CFP certification with the CISI. So please welcome Jane Jones, who is the Director of Operations at Mackenzie Financial Planning. Hello, Jane.
Hi, Jackie. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you on the podcast today because I know that we've got lots to talk about all of your experiences. We're going to get into the weeds of how you passed your CISI Level 7 case study assessment, which is the final stage to become a certified financial planner in the UK. But before we get into all of that, I just want to ask you a little bit about how you got into the financial planning profession. Are you one of the many millions of us out there who kind of fell into it, or was it much more by design?
I'm afraid I'm another one of those millions, Jackie.
That's normal.
Yeah, when I was in my early 20s, I did some admin in an IFA office for a few years, which I really enjoyed. Fast forward to about 2007 when I had two young children and met Paul Jones, who I'm now married to and run a business with, but at the time didn't know. And he had this vision that he was going to create a financial planning firm. And I got involved with that right at the beginning. And yeah, the rest is history, as they say.
Wow. Fantastic. And so what kind of roles, I guess, when you're starting a financial planning firm with Paul, I guess, you're wearing a large number of hats then, are you? What sorts of roles did you undertake in those earlier days?
Yeah, at first, I was always in charge of what was going on behind the scenes. So admin, how to run the business, how we were looking after our clients, anything that's not sitting in front of a client, I was getting involved with all that stuff. And I wasn't really overqualified. I don't know if you remember FP 1, 2 and 3 that were the original qualifications that you had to do. And I'd done those because I really felt that you should know what you were talking about and what you were doing to be involved in a business. But I didn't consider myself a financial planner at all. And in fact, I would say I was a paraplanner at the beginning, primarily, as long as admin. And that's, I think that's where I really got involved in the financial planning world.
Okay. So how did you come across, Paul is a certified financial planner. Was it Paul that kind of said to you, come on, how about you becoming a certified financial planner too? Or, how did you kind of think, okay, come to the conclusion, okay, it's my turn, I'm going to do it too? Yeah,
I would say back in probably about 2010, 2011, we were involved with the IFP, the Institute of Financial Planning, which were the sort of the precursor to the CISI. They were merged with the CISI eventually. And we were involved with the Lancashire and Cumbria branch of the IFP. And a lot of the people that we circulated with and a lot of the people whose businesses I really looked up to, they were CFP. And I sort of viewed that as the ultimate sort of qualification to prove that you really were in this financial planning world and not just a person who sells investment bonds or whatever. Yeah. So I'd been aware of it for a long time, but obviously starting from a place of not really having many financial planning qualifications, I had to get my diploma, I had to get the level 6 qualification, and had to get all that done before I could even think about starting on the CFP. So it was a long journey, and at the same time I've been having a family. I've got 3 children, and I'm running a business. So whilst I've been aware of it for a long time, it's not been until now that I've really been in a position to to commit to it. So
Yes.
yeah, it's been a long journey, like I say.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think also, when you meet other certified financial planners, you learn so much from them while you're rubbing shoulders with them, don't you, anyway? So while you're going through your studies, you're kind of still learning lots of information and, taking it all in through osmosis nearly, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah. And yeah, I still say, obviously, we don't attend CFP meetings anymore, but any, opportunities we get to mix with the people in the true financial planning world, just the conversations that you have with people are so valuable and so relevant to what you do every day. So yeah, that's something I'd encourage anybody to get involved with.
Yeah, excellent. And so you obviously you got your diploma.
Mm-hmm.
You sat the level 6 advanced financial planning exam, did you? Then as part of the 2-pit pathway for CFP?
No, I'd got 2 this chartered financial planner through the CII, and I'm a fellow of the PFS.
Right.
So I'd gone down that route, and I'd done it a little bit differently to how I think people typically do it, because I think typically people would get their diploma so that they can go out and give advice, and then they'd start to get the sort of advanced AAF qualifications. But because I wasn't sort of under pressure to have to be able to sit in front of clients, I was working in the background. I was able to really do a deep dive into each subject area. So I did my diploma level tax exam, and alongside it I did the AF, the higher level tax exam, and I did that with tax, I did that with investments, and I did that with pensions.
Wow.
And I know that's not sort of typical, but if there is anybody that isn't in that position where they need to be diploma qualified because they've got to give some advice, that for me was a really good way of learning, to do that deep dive into each subject area. Yes. Before bringing everything together. And of course, bearing in mind that I'm working in the financial planning world every day. So it's all, it's all in context all the time.
Yeah.
So yes, that's sort of the journey that I'd gone on, and obviously that had taken years. That's not something that you do overnight. It'd taken a good few years, and then not too long ago, you'll have to forgive me, I can't remember when, but the CISI launched a new bridging qualification so that you could almost convert your level 6 with CISI into the foundation of what you would build on to get to the CFP level. So that was a game changer for me, really, because you sit a lot of exams and life's going on, and I was just a little bit exam weary. And the fact that they'd launched this bridging qualification that recognised that knowledge that I already had, as I say, that changed the game for me, and I was able to do that I did it over the course of about 3 or 4 weeks. It's not a massive task if you've already got that knowledge and that experience. Yeah. And that must have been the start of last year, so that's 2023. So having done that, I was sort of ready then to get cracking with my case study.
Excellent. Now, tell us what happened let's do round 1 and then round 2, shall we? So what happened with your case study when you got your first one?
Okay, round 1, I would like to wipe it from my mind. I decided I would wing it. I don't know what I was thinking, really. I think perhaps because we're a financial planning firm and because that's what we do every day, I thought, well, this qualification is just evidence of what I'm doing every day. I'll just get the case study and pretend it's a real client. I'll run it through our financial planning software that we use with everybody, and I'll pass. And I didn't even know fully what the case study entailed. I honestly just enrolled, and it arrived in my email inbox, and I was mildly horrified about the amount of information that there was about these clients and the amount of objectives that they had, and just the amount of work that it was. But I sort of, I ploughed on headstrong. I keyed everything into Presswood Truth, which is what we use for our cash flow software. as I say, I winged it. And it got submitted. It was submitted April last year. And I'd spent, too many hours on it, maybe 100 hours, something like that. And I just felt like I had no idea what I was doing. And it was so different to actually giving advice to a client. When you're face to face with a client, or working alongside a financial planner, and they're talking to the client, you can pick up the telephone and ask them a question. You can say, what do you mean by that? Or is this really more important? And so there was a whole layer of information that I felt like I didn't have because I wasn't able to speak to the client. And then the other thing was that I just wasn't used to the CISI expectations. Before getting the case study, I'm embarrassed. I hadn't gone to the trouble of reading the assessment standards or anything like that. I just thought, I'll make a financial plan, it'll be fine. But no, it clearly wasn't fine. I got the result for that, and it was the only element I'd passed was the financial planning element, and I'd failed all the other elements. And
bless you.
And I it wasn't. I don't think it wasn't because I couldn't do financial planning. It's because I was not prepared for this case study. So disaster.
You're not alone in that, because I think because of it has breadth, doesn't it, the case study?
It does.
Because it's got 4 separate client objectives that you're tackling, but also it has the depth to it as well, with all the, like you say, the nuances. The clients say they feel something about this, or they hate the tax man, and as well as combined with having some assumptions but not all of the assumptions, and not being able to talk to the client at all. Then all of that wrapped up together.
And you have to do it all at once as well, I find, because that's quite different to real life. I think, obviously, when you're meeting clients, you'll have a conversation with them and you'll say, well, we'll get this ball rolling. And then whilst you're doing that, we'll begin to work on this. So, maybe you'll say to them, you need to write a will, get to your solicitor. And they can do that whilst you're working on the next bit. Whereas in the case study, you're sort of preparing sort of an action schedule that says step 1, see your solicitor, step 2, put this money in an ISA, or whatever it is. And you're having to recommend everything all in one go. And that's not what I'm used to in the real world. So yes, very different to what I perhaps envisaged it might be.
So then I think we had a conversation, didn't we, after that?
Did, yeah.
And we decided that actually, I think the issue that I quite commonly find is that if you failed the first submission, quite heavily, then, it's very disappointing. You've put, as you said, put 100 hours in. Some people say to me, oh, Jackie, I feel like, it's a good slap in the face that I don't know what I'm doing. And, and essentially what we discussed was that if you carried on with that same case study, then you basically wasted that first submission, haven't you? Because you do know what you're doing. It's just like you say, you weren't as prepared as you could have been for the very first submission. And so we decided collectively together to start again, didn't we? And buy a brand new case study.
New case study, yes, which was definitely the right choice, I think.
Excellent. And so what happened then? So you joined one of our courses, didn't you?
I did, yes. I joined one of your courses, and I actually did some work before the case study arrived, which was highly recommended. And I think the resources that you'd provided as part of the course were just there to give me that bedding into what the case study was expecting. So things like the assumptions, I know you are obviously given some assumptions by the CISI along with your case study, but there's all sorts of other things that you need to think about. Even simple things like how long the clients are going to live for. So even though you don't know how old your clients are going to be before you get that case study, you can know that you need to look at this place on the Office of National Statistics website to think about how long they might live for. So you can really get yourself in a prepared state rather than just starting from a standing point when the case study arrives. And I think the other thing was my Excel skills. I've got sort of reasonable Excel skills, but to create a cash flow using Excel was certainly far beyond my capabilities. And there was a lot of sort of hand-holding videos, tutorials in just polishing up Excel skills in really quite a structured way that was really beneficial for me. So yeah, I did all that before I got the case study. So that put me in a much better place to start with when it landed in my inbox.
Yeah. And I think, with this case study, it's all about doing that groundwork, isn't it? And knowing what to expect and knowing, it's not about, what do I do with this client? But it's about kind of knowing those background mechanics so that when you get the case study, you can say, right, what do I want to do with this client?
Yeah.
You're not thinking, right, how do I drive a spreadsheet? How do I do this? What assumptions do I need? All of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because you know that you're going to need them. It's just a case of, right, well, what do I need? And then you know how you're going to use them straight away then, don't you?
Yeah. Very much
excellent.
so.
And you have done absolutely brilliantly because you passed on your very first submission with that second case study, haven't you?
I did, yes, which having failed the first one quite catastrophically, I was absolutely sure that I would fail. And I'd thought that maybe I would get a narrow fail and I'd get a rapid resubmission, but I was so sure that I wouldn't pass because it knocked my confidence really.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was convinced I wouldn't pass, but then I did.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Very well done. So tell us about, apart from the Excel spreadsheet work, were there any other particular bits that you kind of thought, oh, yikes, that I'm going to have to think or pause a little bit and think harder about?
Not so much think harder about. I think for me that what would have been difficult if I'd been doing it by myself again would be that feeling of overwhelm, because it is such a massive undertaking and it's hard to know which steps to do first, what order to do things in, and also to understand what the CISI are actually asking you. So I think having somebody, not so much holding my hand, but somebody who knew what they were doing and knew the steps that I should take to get me towards my end goal of, finishing the case study, regardless of whether it passed or not.
Yeah.
I think that's really what I needed and what I suppose stopped me from being in a place where I didn't know what to do or I was feeling too challenged, because I had that support that I needed. Yeah.
Yeah. And so looking back, would you say that if you'd carried on with that first case study, do you think that you could have passed, comparing those two, what you did in version 1 and, the work that we did together? How do those two differ?
I just don't think I would have passed it ever, because, and I'll give you an example. The CISI, when you're looking at the case study, they're asking you to pull out objectives. And with clients, you might say that an objective is to retire at 65 and have a few holidays a year, or, whatever it is, something quite fluffy and warm and vague.
Yes.
But the CISI, an objective in this context, means an actual thing that the clients want to achieve. And you've got to be able to attach a timescale and also a monetary value to it.
Yeah.
So if you don't even know that that's what the CISI are looking for when they say, they want you to pull out the objectives, you're just too far away from what they're looking for. So even though in the real world, yes, you're identifying objectives, for the purposes of this case study, if what you're identifying isn't an objective, you're just never going to get that mark. Even if you've got sort of the right zone, you're just not being concise enough to get a tick in that box.
Yeah.
So I don't think I would ever have passed it by myself.
Wow, that's really interesting. And I think, over the years, both you and I have had lots of conversations with clients about, and I've also had lots of rows actually with other financial planners about what is an objective.
Yeah.
And whether an objective that isn't, a smart objective that's quantified and qualified, like you were saying, it's got a time frame and a monetary amount attached to it, whether that's an objective at all. And that depends on the client, I think, sometimes, doesn't it? Because some things they want to aspire to, but still an objective, but it might be something that, you know, it's kind of a long-term dream that they might not, you know, they might change their mind. Well, obviously you've got shorter-term dreams like, you know, retirement, or medium-term dreams, school fees, retirement, those kinds of things. You know, you definitely need to put some money on. So there's always that dilemma, isn't there, of exactly whether an objective is really objective if it doesn't have those numbers on it.
And we're not writing a dictionary. You know, we don't have to define what objective actually means when we talk to our clients. If they mean one thing, we're looking after them, that we take that on board, that their objective is this sort of life aspiration or life goal or whatever. But the CISI have defined it as this particular thing. So if you want to pass the CISI's case study, you have to look at it in that context.
That's really interesting. And so roughly how many hours did it take you? We'll set aside version 1, rub that out, like you say, pretend it never happened. So how long do you think it took you to work through the course, build your financial plan for the assessment?
It's hard to say, because I think I did a lot of things like listening to podcasts and tutorials and things with people who've passed the case study, and people who are running courses. You know, they'll do an hour free session to give you some tips and things like that. I thought about it incessantly when I was driving my car, when I was putting my children to bed. So, you know, if you include all those hours, I wouldn't like to even think about how many hours I spent. But really, in terms of sort of sitting at my desk and, you know, typing or reading or inputting into a spreadsheet or whatever, I think probably maybe 160 hours, something like that.
Yeah.
Plus all those superfluous hours doing all the other stuff.
Yes, cooking the dinner, stirring the spaghetti bolognese, thinking about your clients. That's completely normal. I think I know that some people I've interviewed on the podcast, they said that when they spoke to their other halves, and they were like, "Oh my goodness, are you ever going to stop talking about that client? Because I feel like you've married them now instead of marrying me." So, but I guess you have the support of another certified financial planner in the family as well, which is a great support.
I was nervous to talk to him because that almost felt like cheating. So I always felt like I had to keep my thoughts to myself. I think I talked more to my children about it than I did to Paul, because I felt nervous that wouldn't be the right thing to do. So there you go.
Oh dear. So looking back now, you know, it's only a short while since you found out that, you've been successful and obviously become a certified financial planner. Do you think that this process has changed the way that you might deal with clients in the future, or, you know, your own parts of the job that you might do in the business in the future? How is it going to change things for you, do you think?
To be honest, Jackie, I'm not sure that a great deal is going to change. Obviously, my husband, my co-director, is a CFP and has been since, about, 2008 or something like that. So we've been working in a financial planning framework. We're an accredited, from the CISI. Yeah. So we are working in that financial planning world. And I think rather than making me make changes, it's given me confidence that what we're doing is right. And the desire to carry on in this, which still seems sometimes like quite a new world of financial planning.
Absolutely. And I think, confidence actually, I've interviewed quite a few women on the podcast, and they say to me that the boost in their confidence that they've achieved this huge undertaking themselves, like you say, essentially on your own, it's got to be 100% all your own work, is a massive confidence boost for, whether you see clients or how you interact with clients, moving forward, whether it doesn't necessarily have to change the fundamental makeup of a business, particularly, as you say, you're already doing full comprehensive financial planning as a business anyway. But I think that confidence is a key element, isn't it?
I think it is, yes. And as I said earlier, we do, we'll go to perhaps, for example, the CISI Financial Planning Conference, and I'll be holding my head high, knowing that I'm as well qualified and as expert as anybody else there.
Absolutely.
People have been doing this for years and years. I have the confidence now that what we're doing is just as good as what anybody else is doing. And what our clients are getting is absolutely top level financial planning that they would get from any of the sort of elite financial planning firms. So, yeah, it's given me a boost in myself and in my business as well.
Yeah, excellent. And rightly so. So let's wrap up the interview then, and let's talk about what we can offer, what we can suggest to people who are interested in becoming certified financial planners themselves. Do you have any advice for those people who are starting on their journey today?
Yeah, I think I've given this some thought, and I think I've got sort of three tips. And I think the first thing would be to make sure that you've got your ducks in a row, not just in terms of having an idea of what assumptions you might use and how to use an Excel spreadsheet, but things like clearing the space in your diary. If it's the end of the tax year and people are going to ring you up and say, oh, I've just decided I am going to make that £60,000 pension contribution. You don't want to be interrupted by that when you're trying to think about how somebody should be solving their IHT problem or whatever. You need to find a space in your diary where you can really focus on it, and not just in a work context, but in the home context as well. I've got 3 children, and I relied really heavily on Paul to just be dad for them whilst I was sitting in my little office room working in the evenings and whatnot. So I think you really need to be prepared and as I say, have your ducks in a row before you start.
Yeah.
The second thing is that issue I alluded to earlier of understanding what the CISI are looking for, because the case study is for them a way of testing that you fully understand financial planning, what is required, what all the different elements are, and it's not real life. So whereas in real life it might suit a client to say something, in the CISI's world, you need to say the one thing that is going to tick the box in the marking scheme that shows the evidences what they are looking for. So don't get confused with trying to create a beautiful financial plan for a client, because that's not what it is. It is an assessment rather than an example of your real life work.
Yeah.
And then I think the other thing is to be honest about who you are and how you work. I think for myself, I need a process to follow. I need to be in a state of some stress, but not too much stress. I get paralyzed by too much stress and paralyzed by not enough stress. I like to be in this zone which we call stressphoria in our family. To know how you know what makes studying easy for you, whether it's like drawing little diagrams on pieces of paper, or whether it's keying something into a cash flow model, or whether it's talking it out loud to somebody. If you're really confident about what's your own best way of working before you start, then you can go with your strengths rather than try to make yourself do something that doesn't work for you. And because it is such a big commitment in terms of time, I think if you're trying to do something that doesn't suit you, it's going to be like banging your head against a wall for 200 hours. Whereas at least if you're doing it in a way that suits you, you can find the process quite enjoyable and sort of get drawn into the, as I say, the stressphoria of solving that puzzle and completing that task. So yeah, know yourself and how you're going to approach it before you start.
Fantastic tips, Jane. Stressphoria, that's a new one on me. I'm gonna but I like it. I understand where you're coming from. I do like it. Yes. Jane, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you, Jackie.
It's really interesting, isn't it, to listen to different people who have different experiences of gaining their Certified Financial Planner certification, or maybe developing the financial planning profession at large. If you know anybody who you think might be interested in listening to any of these podcasts, then please do pass on our details. That's it for me. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. See you again soon. Bye for now.